Good morning. It's a joy to be with you at the Newbold Bible Conference 2023, and I look forward to being able to share a paper with you on the transformational Old Testament context of Revelation 5, verse 5. The book of Revelation is a lot like the movie Shrek. There are scenes in Shrek that draw on previous movies, particularly those made by Disney. When Donkey says, "I can fly," he's drawing from the Disney movie Peter Pan. When Donkey says, "You might have seen a horn fly, you might have seen a superfly, but you ain't never seen a donkey fly," there again, the producers are drawing from the Disney movie Dumbo. Viewers who are unfamiliar with the previous movies will not be able to grasp some of the nuances in the meaning of the movie Shrek. Shrek, in fact, then gives its informed viewers a richer experience in meaning-making. Analogously, this morning, the book of Revelation can only be understood in the light of its Old Testament background. What Disney is to Shrek, the Old Testament is to the book of Revelation. In fact, Richard Borkham suggests that the Old Testament allusions are meant to recall the Old Testament context, which thereby becomes part of the meaning the apocalypse conveys, and to build up, sometimes by a network of allusion, to the same Old Testament passage in various parts of the apocalypse, and interpretation of whole passages of Old Testament prophecy. This morning, we'll reflect on Revelation 5 and 6a. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." Then I saw a lamb, looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. The lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. Surprisingly, the Old Testament literary and thematic context of the allusions of the Lion of the tribe of Judah and the Root of David have not been deeply explored, and hence their interpretational value has not been mined to understand the transition from the symbol of lion to the symbol of lamb. In fact, the lacuna is so significant that English and German commentators have not explored this context. Most academic discussion around Revelation 5 has contended, and rightly so, that the phrase "the Lion of the tribe of Judah," referring to Genesis 49, verse 9, and "the Root of David," referring to Isaiah 11, verses 1 and 10, combine to point to messianic deliverance. Craig Kuster suggests that the lion imagery has 2 key meanings: power and kingship. He references a number of biblical and extra-biblical sources to bolster these claims, but provides no contextual analysis of these passages. Brian Blount has referenced, especially in relation to this idea of the root of David, a number of texts in Jeremiah and Zechariah, but again, no additional insight on how we can understand the juxtaposition of Isaiah 11:1, Isaiah 11:10 in relation to Revelation 5:5. The scholarly discussion has also focused on how we can understand the transition from symbol of lion to that of symbol of lamb in 5:6, and the impact this has on interpretation. For example, Wilfred Harrington points out the reason for the deliberate switch. He says, the lion is the lamb. The ultimate power of God is manifest on the cross. Ramsey Michael, another commentator, suggests that the lion and lamb interpret and clarify each other. The Jewish Messiah is the Christian Messiah. The triumphant lamb is, the triumphant lion is the slaughtered lamb. And so while these interpretations look back at salvation history, the analysis is based more on a theologizing of the text rather than a careful study, a careful exegesis of the text. In sum, then, while there's general agreement that John is alluding to Genesis 49:9 and Isaiah 11:1 and 10, the literary relationship between lion and lamb is very much open to debate. Moreover, the wider literary and thematic context of these Old Testament passages has not been explored, and it's our contention this morning that a deeper probe of these contexts will provide new avenues of meaning making. And so, it is to that we now turn. The symbol of lion of the tribe of Judah points us to the story of Judah in Genesis 37 to 44, which constitutes the story of Jacob. And the story of Jacob is in fact particularly that of Joseph and is one of divine providence. Our first encounter of Judah in the Joseph story that's pertinent is in Genesis 37. The context is that Joseph has been stripped of his coat, thrown into a pit, and the brothers are sitting down to have a meal. They look up and they see some Ishmaelite traders. And the text reads, Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. Judah speaks up to keep Joseph from being killed. And while the narrator does not give us modern readers any ideas about Judah's motives, it appears he acts out of selfish reasons. The narrative takes a supposed diversion, and in view of some scholars, an irrelevant one, to focus on the illicit encounter of Judah and Tamar in Genesis 38. The Joseph story, of course, is picked up again in chapter 39. The two leading characters, according to James McKeon, in the final chapters of Genesis are Judah and Joseph. And they are compared since they are both contenders for the special privileges due to the firstborn. Robert Longacre suggests the story about Joseph and Judah is a glimpse into the embryonic nation, with the Judah and Joseph tribes destined to have preeminence in the south and north, respectively. The story about Judah, therefore, is not an intrusion into the story about Joseph, but rather presents a seamless narrative of the providential leading in the characters in Genesis and specifically in the family of Jacob. Providence, to see before. The notion of video, to see, pro, before, a little bit of Latin. And so the notion of providence is to see before. And so we see then in Genesis particularly, the providential hand of God leading in the affairs of the leading characters. Genesis 38 chronicles the story, of course, of this illicit affair with Tamar. And then our story moves along now to Genesis 43. Context: Simeon has been held by Joseph in Egypt. The brothers have returned with their father, to their father with grain, but also a sack of money that Joseph has placed in each of their bags. They're in a strong dilemma as to what to do because Joseph has requested that the youngest brother is brought back. Unknowingly to them, Joseph, of course, knows that that is Benjamin. Now the text here in Genesis 43 reads, Judah said to Israel, his father, "Send the boy with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you and our little ones. I will be a pledge of his safety. From my hand you shall require him. For if I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever." Judah encourages his father to send Benjamin with him, and he desires to be a pledge of safety for Benjamin, willing, in fact, to be blamed forever. Our very own Lawrence A. Turner acknowledges that there is more than a hint that Judah's character is in the process of change. The final verses for our consideration this morning are in Genesis chapter 44, in what one scholar calls the moral high point of Judah's career. It reads, "Your servant guaranteed the boy's safety to my father. I said," Judah speaking to Joseph, "if I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you, my father, all my life. Now then, please, let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers." Judah's readiness to sacrifice, to put himself into slavery instead of abandon his brother, is the final turning point in the narrative. And so the renowned Old Testament scholar Victor Hamilton suggests a spiritual metamorphosis for the better has taken place in Judah. His speech in chapter 44 represents a profound advancement over his speech about Joseph in Genesis 37. He who once callously engineered the selling of Joseph to strangers out of envy and anger is now willing to become Joseph's slave, so that the rest of his brothers, and especially Benjamin, may be freed and allowed to return to Canaan to rejoin their father. In sum, we see then the transformation in the character of Judah. Let's now look at the passage in Isaiah 11. You recall in the Gospels, Jesus, in Mark particularly, after the temptation narrative, is with the wild beasts. The Gospel writers understood Isaiah 11 verses 1 to 10 as pointing forward to the Messianic, Isaiah at least, saw it as pointing forward to the Messianic kingdom. The Gospel writers look back at Isaiah 11, 1 to 10, and acknowledge that the Messianic kingdom has arrived in the person of Jesus, as he is with the wild animals in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, 12 through to 14. Isaiah 11, 1 to 10 is then our next passage for consideration. Due to time constraints, we won't read the whole passage. But through the family tree of Jesse, David is going to be introduced to the lineage of Messiah. Notice that the reference in Isaiah 11, 1 to 10 is to the line of Jesse, pointing forward then to the coming of a new David. And this David would have the Spirit resting upon him. Notice that the Spirit would impart 7 virtues: wisdom, understanding, knowledge, empower, to equip. And it's fascinating as you think about the 7 qualities the Spirit will impart in Isaiah 11. We see a 7-fold outpouring of the Spirit upon the Lamb in Revelation chapter 5, verse 6. So Revelation 5, verse 6, the Lamb with 7 spirits, is also an allusion to Isaiah 11, verses 1 to 7. This branch, the stump that becomes a branch, becomes, in Isaiah 11, verses 1 to 10, the ideal king. An ideal king prophesied by Isaiah, who is still to come. 700 years down the track, God is faithful to his promise. The Messiah, Jesus, will arrive on the scene of human history. What are the transformations that take place here in Isaiah 11? Well, notice the predators live in peace with their prey, and their carnivorous instincts are transformed. The defenseless in this ancient society, namely children, are able to be free to play with deadly snakes. And notice as well the interesting features about the lion here in Isaiah chapter 11, particularly verses 6 and 7. A young child is able to lead the animals, including the lion, and this lion is transformed because it now eats straw like an ox. Isaiah depicts a future time when God will overcome the curse of sin and establish the Messianic age in which the created order is able to thrive. Pardon me. So there you see on the PowerPoint some of the key changes I have just mentioned. Let's head to the finish line this morning. We see then a transformation in both Genesis and Isaiah. We also see something specific that happens to the lion in both Genesis and Isaiah. Judah becomes a pledge of safety for his younger brother Benjamin. Judah, the lion, acts like a lamb in Genesis, ready to give his life in self-sacrifice. The nature of the lion in Isaiah 11 verses 6 and 7 is changed so that a child can lead it and it can eat straw. Notice that the lion undergoes a fundamental change in both Genesis and Isaiah. The lion, in fact, is transformed. The lion, in fact, transforms the lamb into a formidable warrior who triumphs through sacrificial death. From a theological perspective, the Old Testament background of Revelation 5:5 points to moral, eschatological, and creational transformation in the context of our study this morning. These transformations serve the telos of God in bringing about the arrival of Messiah. These various forms of transformation are possible because of the consistency and the power of the character of God. Moral transformation is seen in the Judah narrative, is based on the permissive will of God when an individual comes to realize their shortfalls under the prompting of the Holy Spirit, and they enact change. Eschatological transformation, as seen in Isaiah 11, is based on the efficacious will of God, wherein he outlines future redemptive realities based on the eternal covenant. And then creational transformation, as seen in both Genesis and Isaiah, is based in part on the sovereign will of God to re-establish Eden. And so we see moral, eschatological, and creational transformation emerging from our study and dovetailing within the various aspects of the will of God. His sovereign or decretive will, his efficacious will, and then his will to restore everything to Eden. The gospel writers have a foretaste of this with the coming of Messiah. In the context of our study today, God's work in the world is an extension of his character. May God bless us as we continue to fellowship together during the 2023 Newbold Bible Conference.